know. I've been seeing pictures of you floating around in bright colors in places that I assume were Florida.
I was on the Today. Is this on? I was on the Today Show this morning. So unlike last year, where I had to run out of here to get the red eye to go to New York to do the Today Show, I did it in the opposite direction. I got up super early this morning to do the Today Show, and then they sped me out to the airport to sit around for 3 hours and wait for my flight. And then the flight just got in, and we came here.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I'm glad to be here. It's the best bookstore on the planet.
Even if I'm at a loss for words. Such a rare moment.
Got a little caffeine right here, a little attitude adjustment in a can, personality in a can, that's what I call it.
See, I decided not to get up and watch you during television. I learned this lesson years ago. Dave Barry came out for his first actual fiction. I mean, he writes fiction all the time, essentially, but it was a novel, quote. And he was on the Today Show, and we were doing television with the Scottsdale Library at that point, so he and I were set up to do an interview. And I thought, I could terrify myself by getting up at 5 a.m. and watching Dave Barry on the Today Show, or I could just skip it and go and do my interviews. So when we got there, I said to Dave, I decided not to terrify myself and get up and watch you on the Today Show. And he said, those guys, it's all about them. He said, this is going to be all about me, right?
It's funny because
is that true?
We got to, so I was on with two lovely folks on the Today Show. How many people saw it this morning in here? So a bunch of people saw it. I have been very blessed to be asked by the Today Show to come every quarter, every 3 months, and to talk about books. Books for fall, books for the holidays, books for the spring. And so they said, we want you to come and you pick a fiction book, non-fiction book, and a wild card, author's choice. And so I was really excited about the new Grisham book, Camino Island, not knowing that I'd be neck and neck for the New York Times list, even in his third. So I go on the Today Show and I'm promoting his book, and it's between me and him for the #1 slot this week on the New York Times list. But I'm supposed to be a neutral arbiter. I'm not supposed to take sides, pick a great book. I picked another book for my nonfiction book by Karen Vaughn, and it's called World Changer. And Karen Vaughn's son, Aaron, was a Navy SEAL that died in a terrible helicopter crash, shot down by an RPG, not long after the bin Laden raid. This happened in Afghanistan. There were all these conspiracy theories that maybe it had been a response for the bin Laden raid. And it was the worst loss of life in Navy SEAL history. And she wrote a lovely book about not just her son, but about raising her son and how we can raise great kids to go out and be brave enough to do what they feel is right, whether they want to protect the environment, whether they want to fight in the Navy SEALs. It was a nonpartisan, just lovely, lovely book. And so I recommended that because the day she had come out a few weeks ago, I had read it, I blurbed it, but a few weeks ago when she launched her book, there was a huge glitch at a major online retailer whose name shall go unmentioned.
You can say it.
Yeah, Amazon. And they had lost her book in the system. So this poor mother who had summoned all this wonderful courage to write this lovely book, had arranged all this media to go on talk shows, and all these people were watching them when they went to buy it because they're not smart enough to buy from their local independent bookstore. So when they go on to do that, and it's okay to order from Amazon and stuff like that, that's fine, but there had been a glitch, and there were all these people that immediately thought it was a conspiracy theory because she was the mom of a SEAL, which is just ridiculous. Stuff happens. Stuff happens. It's happened to me where certain things have gone wrong, but such a lovely woman, the people at Amazon felt terrible, and so a bunch of us said, well, what can we do? So anybody here listen to Dave Barry? Okay, so Dave Barry.
Dave Barry?
So no. I've got Dave Barry on the brain now.
Not Dave.
No, I'm thinking of the finance. You see, I've been on the brain. Dave Ramsey, thank you very much. Dave, if you're watching, I apologize. Dave Ramsey's actually a friend of mine. I eat dinner at his house in Nashville. This is what happens when you've been on an airplane all day and up very early to do the Today Show. But anyway, Dave Ramsey's got 13 million listeners, could not have been nicer. And when he heard what had happened, how this, thing had happened, that her book wasn't available, and it was tough for people to get, he had her on our show. And then I said, well, what can I do? And so when Today Show said, what book are you going to pick? I said, I'm going to pick this one. So it was really nice. And then we got down to Wild Card, and so I decided, well, of course, I have a new book out, and I go 4 times a year to Today's Show, and I said, can I pick my book? And they said yes. And so it got to this segment where Isaac Fitzgerald, the editor for BuzzFeed Books, and then Emma Straub, the author and independent bookstore owner. She opened a new shop in Brooklyn called Books Are Magic. They did theirs, and then they got to me, and I don't know if any of you have ever seen that running gag on with Jimmy Kimmel and Matt Damon, where he'll have Matt Damon out, and they'll ask him one question, then they'll play the music, and they'll go, "Oh, I'm sorry, we're out of time, we can't." So Lauer started doing that kind of to me. He started kind of talking, and I thought Lauer was like, "We're running out of time," and I'm like, what did he forget? And he looked at Isaac, and he's like, he said something like, "How do you spell shameless?" or whatever, and Isaac spelled it, and then he says, "Okay, now let's have, with the understanding of what shameless is, well, Brad Thor is going to put his pick up." And I said, "Well, I really like this author. I think this is the hottest book of the summer," and I promoted my book, and they were good sports there today.
That's wonderful. You have had an exciting day. This is going to be a really anticlimax.
Yep. No. This is the best part of being on tour. I've said this with you, that I love doing this because you're the folks that I work for. So this is my job, my performance review. When I come on the road once a year to see everybody and say, "How am I doing? Do you like what I'm doing? Or some things you want to see more of?" And that's why the question part is my absolute favorite.
Well, to answer, try it again. I certainly can't talk tonight, so I'm really sorry. To ask a question, I was reading in an interview you did that when you wrote Scott Harvest's first book, you didn't intend him to continue as the series character. So what happened?
So I'm a big fan of Michael Crichton, and I thought it was really great author. And I thought I loved just every single story, and there wasn't really a series that I had read with Crichton. It was Timeline or Jurassic Park or the Andromeda Strain and all this stuff. And I wanted the freedom and the excitement of creating new characters every single time that I was going to write. And after my first book, The Lions of Lucerne, I had to pitch my editor and let her know what my next idea was. And she said, wait, you're not bringing back Scott Harvath? And I said, no, it's the whole Michael Crichton thing. I'm going to do this. And she said, but we got a lot of great fan mail for Harvath. People like it. The test readers we used and everything, they love it. You have to do it. I said, I don't know if I want to do a series. She said, let me ask you, have there been authors you enjoy where it wouldn't matter where the story was taking place, you want to go on another adventure with that character? I said, yeah, there's tons of them. She said, well, that's what I'm trying to tell you. You should do Scott Harvath as a series character. So it was because of my editor that Scott Harvath kept coming back. Originally, I just planned for one book.
Wow. So we are now at number 16?
16, he made a quick appearance in the Athena project.
Right.
It's kind of just a little bit of a bridge, but yeah, this is the 16th, all just Scott Harvath. And by the way, if there's anyone in here who hasn't read my books before, the other piece of advice my editor gave me was write each book so that it stands alone. So that if somebody walks into the Poison Pen and the only book on the shelf is the latest, you don't want those people to say, oh, well, I'm going to go buy this book. I'm going to get a James Rollins book. I always tease James Rollins and Steve Barry. I'm going to get, and it's fine. If you want to get, after you've read all my books and have enjoyed them, feel free to go get a James Rollins or a Steve Barry book. But what was also fun for me in this is I'm a big Brad Meltzer fan. If you have not seen Brad Meltzer speak here,
Yes.
you've got, no, if there's anybody in the audience, and I know who's been here. If you haven't been to one of his signings, you have to come. He is the loveliest person you will ever meet. And another person who I love in the nonfiction genre is, in that category, is Eric Larson. And it turned out that my favorite book of his, my wife loved Devil in the White City. She loved that. I loved In the Garden of Beasts, about the rise of the Nazis in the 1930s and into the 40s in Germany. And I loved it, and it turns out my editor, her husband who's an editor, edited that book. Just kind of a small world. I love Larson. So in Use of Force, there is a particular operator who is always has a book in his hand, and you'll see that one is a Brad Meltzer book, and another one is an Eric Larson book, because it was kind of my way of paying homage to two writers whom I really like.
That's so much fun. Yeah. And you might have missed it if he hadn't told you. So thank you very much for that. Okay, so without wishing to make any comparisons of anything, we've talked to a number of thriller writers so far,
Okay.
and I've seen some themes that I think have been consistent throughout the books that we've been hosting and that I've been reading. One of which is a conviction that the terror threat is so real that we are really, and so present, that maybe we're not doing enough, we aren't doing enough to combat it. So therefore, you as authors are creating some kind of operation or hero or both or something, you know, to combat with that. To combat
Oh,
that.
that our writing somehow is actually contributing to the...
No, the other way around. I think that
They're
it
giving
is
us...
helping people feel, you know, that in fact something can.
Oh, it's making the
There is
fiction even more
pushback.
real,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, it is interesting, and then my biggest concern, just as a husband and father, an American, has been that we might see ourselves under the ever-present possibility of siege the way they are in Israel, where you can go to a cafe or a restaurant and not know what's going to happen. Could that be it? So yeah, I mean, it has gotten to the point now, and as we take land away from ISIS, it's going to be like a ruptured spleen. These guys, when they lose the caliphate, or all that poison is going to go in different directions, and they're going to end up going back to their home countries. And I hope not, but there's no reason to believe that they would do anything different than go and commit terror attacks. I mean, it could happen someplace like this. It could happen at dinner, before or after an event like this. And I've been on the news a lot lately with what has happened in London and Manchester and Paris, saying, we hear a lot on TV that these guys were on the radar of the FBI, like the guy down in Florida at the Pulse nightclub. You hear that with some of the jihadists in Great Britain. We know that there's open cases, investigations into ISIS in all 50 states in the U.S., and that Western intelligence services in general are drowning because there's so many leads. They can't sit on these guys all the time, and so on and so forth. And now I've been going out, I don't know why we haven't heard this from members of Congress, but I've been going out saying, well, instead of after the fact saying, wow, why couldn't we do anything? I think we ought to lower the prosecutorial bar for jihadism. We have a zero tolerance policy when it comes to child pornography. If you go on the net and you're surfing child porn, you get caught, you're going to go to jail. So everybody that I know who is a Muslim person, whether it's in my neighborhood or people I know in different ventures, I say, any reason why, you know, somebody needs to look at beheading videos or needs to listen to hate sermons where they're saying that anybody who's non-Muslim should be killed? And they all agree. They're like, no, there's no reason. And they describe those as gateway drugs or kind of on-ramps to violence with jihadism. So I'd like to see the prosecutorial bar lowered so it's easier to prosecute people earlier in the process. And the other thing I want to do is with co-conspirators. If you even allow a bad guy to sleep on your couch and you know he's planning something and he does do something, I think you ought to be going away not for years but for decades. I think we ought to make it such a big punishment to be involved in this kind of stuff that we get these guys early. I mean, we've got to protect civil liberties. I'm talking with a reformed lawyer right here, a recovering lawyer. So I'm a big civil libertarian, so I want to be careful with that stuff. But that's why I drew the comparison to child pornography, that we've got a zero tolerance there. And I think if we can catch these guys early with stuff that the mainstream Muslim community agrees has no place in the world, like the beheading videos and that kind of stuff, that we might get ahead of this instead of having something happen like in San Bernardino or in Orlando and saying after the fact, you know, the FBI knew about them, but why couldn't we do more?
Well, I actually agree with it. So, it sounds better. I think there are two things that flow on from that. One is, can government actually deal with this, or do you need somebody like Scott and his team, you know, to be more mobile, more flexible? But the other is, how much do we trust government? Because a common theme also in a great many thrillers is that there's something wrong within the government. You know, there's a rogue guy in the CIA, or there's,
Right.
And you know, so I was thinking back. David Baldacci's Absolute Power was the first book I can remember in which the president was a serial rapist, remember that?
Yeah.
And a killer. And
Yep.
I thought, okay, there's a bar crossed. Up until
Right.
then, you know, you didn't do that. And now, you know, when you pick up a book, very often you know that, you know, the head of some government agency or whatever it is actually going to be, if not a traitor, out for his own gain, whatever it might happen to be, on a revenge mission in Ben Coe's book, you know.
Mhm.
So again, is there a need, you know, for as a writer, is it more fun to create something like Scott and his team, or you mentioned Jim Rollins, Sigma Force,
Right,
or
right.
whatever?
Yep. And Cotton Malone and Steve Barry's books, which is a little bit different. It's funny to watch Steve Barry and James Rollins together because James Rollins does a lot of science, a little history, and then Steve Barry talks about being a lot of history and a little science. So it's really funny. By the way, one year we all agreed that we would put each other's main character in one of our books. And we have done this. So I did Painter Crow from Jim Rollins in one of my books, and I did Cotton Malone in one of my books. And every once in a while on Twitter or Facebook, you'll have somebody pop up and go, Steve Barry talked about Scott Harvath, and I'll go, oh, I'm going to sue that Steve Barry. And people are like, right on, you go get him. You shouldn't be able to do that without your permission. But as far as the Scott Harvath, I'm a big believer that we need Scott Harvaths in the world. Like, there's very dangerous work that needs to be done. We need to empower him to go out and do it. But we're a nation of laws, not a nation of men and women. That's what a republic is. It's from the Latin, res publique, the public thing, which is the law. So we need, and we put certain restraints on our people. What can you do and can't you do in interrogations and all that kind of stuff. So I write it the way I would really like to see it happen. But at the end of the day, I also weave in, it's like playing whack-a-mole. Because Harvath can go out and hit these bad guys when they pop up, but if you don't go after the kind of the root ideology, that 10% that are using the religious texts to justify what they're doing. Like I'll say in the book that I talk about the fact that Al-Qaeda, whenever they would do an attack, bin Laden would put out one message for the West that would complain about America's support for Israel and American military bases in Saudi Arabia. That would be his justification in English in his press releases that we'd all see. But what you'd see in the Muslim world wouldn't cover that stuff. It would actually be based on passages from the Quran and the Hadith. So it was a completely different PR strategy. So my thing has always been, whether it's been on TV, in the books, in the Red Cell program for the Department of Homeland Security, that if we don't ally ourselves with Muslim partners and encourage them to bring about a reformation, because Judaism's had a reformation, Christianity's definitely had a reformation, and Islam has not since its inception. So my belief, when you see these people, my kids wanted to go to London, they want stamps on their passports, they haven't been overseas and stuff, and they wanted to go to London and Paris, and the travel restriction came out, the warning came out of the State Department. I talked to some friends of mine, and this is before things really started taking off, and we would have been on Westminster Bridge or London Bridge. There was a machete attack at the Louvre, there was a hammer attack at Notre Dame, and then there was something on the Champs-Elysees where a guy had gas canisters. And so I said to the kids, we're gonna wait. Let's kind of see how this shakes out. But I think that we miss an opportunity in the West, along with our fellow citizens who are Muslim, if we don't use those opportunities to demand reform and more freedom in the Muslim world. Because that's where this junk, crazy jihadism thrives, is under kind of totalitarian regimes. If you empower women to vote, if you let women drive, if you believe in equality, whether someone is Jewish or Muslim or non-Muslim, you don't allow people to kill people if they leave the Muslim faith. If we push for reforms every time there's an ounce of blood or an attempted attack on this side, I'm hoping, it's a big thing, there's a great writer, by the way, named Sam Stein, and he wrote something for the Huffington Post that the title of the article was Losing Our Spines to Save Our Necks, and how we need to be more active in the public square talking about the ideology that motivates these attacks. He said, and we need to do it not just to say Western civilization is superior. He said, we actually need to do it to help Muslim reformers. The Muslim reformers in Saudi Arabia, in Iran, they're everywhere. They're throughout the Muslim world. But if we don't help shine a spotlight on what needs to be fixed, those people have an even harder job. And so if we get together and say, this needs to change, it actually empowers the Muslim reformers inside that want to kind of decouple the violence from the text and basically ostracize those people that do that. So it was a great article. It's one of my favorite articles ever, and I tweet it all the time to people.
Excellent. And maybe the new Saudi prince will have...
How about that? Yeah, that was a big change.
Right, and there's a wonderful book out at the moment. We're going to talk about use of force. I promise. One second. But there's a book that I read. I don't remember if it's your publisher. Anyway, I kept reading the books, and so I picked them up. And I think it's called She Drives. But it's a really fabulous book about the young Saudi woman who decided she was going to defy all the Sharia law and all.
And that's a big deal because I mean you could get 100 lashes, and it's a very serious deal.
It could ruin her family, in fact. But anyway, she persevered, and as a consequence, it may well be that she was the driving motive for that small step. Well, anyway,
yes.
You have created for this book a truly terrifying villain. I mean, we meet him at the outset, and he is amazing. And he's not Well, you describe it in your book.
So, I was fascinated. I keep an eye on the FBI's website, and I'm always looking at, who the big criminals are that they're after domestically, internationally, and so forth. And very, very interesting. ISIS made a man who was a colonel in the federal police force from Tajikistan their minister of war in real life. So this guy in Tajikistan, it's very interesting in the stands. You have a lot of, not Soviet anymore, but because it was Soviet influence throughout the stands, Russian influence now, what you'll find is that U.S. intelligence and Russian intelligence like to kind of comb through special operations units in the stands, different parts of the government, but particularly with kind of paramilitary police forces and things like this, where they'll go in and they'll offer to give a little extra training and things like this. You can come to the United States, and oftentimes they'll farm it out to like a Blackwater type contractor, and they can get training and stuff. So there is this guy who was a colonel in the federal police force in Tajikistan. And the Russians had brought him over to Russia to do training with the Spetsnaz, their special forces, and we'd had him over to the United States. He'd done something with whatever the latest iteration. Blackwater's gone through a couple of different name changes over the years, but he had done some training there too. Nobody picked him up from all accounts. They didn't. So they'll test you. They'll bring you to their home country and they'll put you through some stuff, but they'll buy you beers. Well, not beers in his case because he's a Muslim person. But they'll try to put somebody on you to get to know you, and they'll see, can we turn this guy? Can he be an asset, an intelligence asset for us? Russians tried to do the same. Anyway, this guy got very, very radicalized in Tajikistan, and he quit the police force. Tajikistan is incredibly corrupt. And you'll see in the book I talk about the fact that the license plate of the president of Tajikistan is 8888, and your worth in the country goes down from there. When the cops pull you over, they'll pull you over and they will arrest your car if you don't have road flares and these certain things in the back. They don't call it impounding, they call it arresting. And it's kind of wink wink, can I pay the fine here, officer, that kind of thing. So you gotta roll around with a wedge of cash when you're in Tajikistan. And I knew a special forces soldier who had operated there and done some training, so I found out a lot about Tajikistan. The guy had like 1,000 pictures. It was awesome to see all the things he had seen there. So my bad guy actually is based on this real Tajik that has a $4 million bounty on his head now from the FBI.
Well, he's fabulous. And of course, to really set up a thriller, you need to have an antagonist, a bad guy, right? Because otherwise Scott is chasing some, who knows what. So I thought he was great. And then, by God, you move us to Burning Man in Nevada. I mean, seriously, how many of you have been to the Burning Man Festival? Anybody?
I'd be surprised if there was anyone here. Half naked, doing drugs, techno music. Not a big appeal for this crowd, huh? Okay, well, we got one guy over here. Good.
Dad is kind of invited me to go with him next year.
Oh, I told Barbara I'd already bought a ticket for next year.
Anyway, I mean, it's fabulous, and there we are in this totally unlikely place, and, and a whole action thing goes down.
It's a great spot potentially for a terrorist attack, particularly because it's kind of like a Woodstock type thing. You don't buy and sell stuff there. It's very communal, very accepting, non-judgmental, and costumes. So if anybody acts odd, they're not going to get reported to the authorities. And you can wear a mask and nobody knows who you are. So it's a perfect opportunity for a terrorist to strike. Plus, last year, they had 1,000 kids 12 years old or younger. And they put the families in one particular area of the Burning Man camp. And what I thought was fascinating, too, was this whole thing where the center of the Burning Man camp, it's set up almost like a horseshoe. The center of the camp, you go out from the bottom of the horseshoe, right out there is the effigy they burned on the last Saturday night, the Burning Man. But if you keep the line going, it goes all the way to the center of the cathedral, Santiago de Compostela in Spain. And I thought that was really, really interesting, that there's kind of this sacred geometry tie-in with Burning Man.
I thought that we would have room. I have been to the cathedral in
have you?
Santiago, and I've attended the Pilgrim's Mass, and it appears in the book, so this is relevant. Because, I don't know if you've gotten into the background of this, because people who had walked hundreds of miles, over the centuries, when they arrive at the cathedral, there's a big fountain where they could kind of clean up, but generally they're not too clean when they go inside, plus they have bugs and other stuff. So they decided that what they would do is they would hang this giant censer. You know, in Catholic Mass, there's incense anyhow. So this
You said incense?
Incense.
I'm just making sure.
We've
And I'm a
already-
product of Catholic school, so I just wanted to make sure I heard the word.
It smells good, and there's a reason, which is basically to fumigate the cathedral. So the thing hangs down, and as the mass goes on, there are four, I think it's
They're
four.
like pulling on
But
this.
they're
yeah.
actually city officials. They are salaried city officials, and their job is to start this thing swinging.
It's pretty
And
neat.
as it goes on, it begins, you know, it's a graveler, right? But it does
Yep.
this thing.
It goes almost
And
up to the ceiling
Rob
and
is actually video. I have a video of it, and I would love to have shown it tonight. But eventually, it goes all the way like this and all the way like this. So I thought your scene in that was just. Have you been there?
no, I haven't. I've talked to some people that have been there, and I saw a ton of videos. And it was interesting because I wanted to do certain kind of structural things to the cathedral. And I talked to a buddy of mine who is a explosives expert, works for the Navy SEALs and diffuses any bombs. He's like, "You're an idiot. You can't do that. The columns are like." He'd been there, and he goes, "No way, Thor. What you want to?" He said, "You would need like 3 days of these bad guys unpacking explosives and taking them in there." He's like, "It never would happen. Never would happen." Darn it! So I had to rewrite the whole thing, but I wanted it to be correct. So that's my big thing. You can't cheat. You can't make up your own set of rules. And I always wonder, if I ever got a chance, I would love to have coffee or sit down and have a drink with Stephen King, because I would never say that Stephen King has it easy. But I would love to talk to somebody who makes up kind of his own rules for his universe. Versus me, I have to use the weapons and tactics and the chain of command. There's a lot of guide rails, if you will, to what I do. And I don't think it's any easier for Stephen King, but I would love to know what it's like for him and how he creates things kind of out of whole cloth, whether it's a pet cemetery or what have you.
Well, you did an incredible job with Burning Man. I mean, just to orchestrate the action, it was. I mean, when you read it, you can almost play it in your head. It's so real and it's so visual. It's almost like a movie scene. And I thought, wow, you know, just did that
And
brilliantly.
that's how I write it, and thank you. That's how I write it. It's like seeing a movie play out in my mind, and that's how I do it. And I wanted something big, something American, that nobody had written about before.
Yeah, not downtown Manhattan,
Right,
or you know, but something unexpected.
Yeah, that's why I chose it.
So Scott really revs into action. Here's another thing.
Watched a lot of videos, by the way, and it was research. Of these naked people running around in the desert, all 21, 22, a couple of 26-year-olds. All research, Barbara. All, I told my wife, all research.
Did you
hated
discuss
every
that
minute.
on the Today Show?
No.
That's why you come here. Because
Did you see?
They
I had
don't
a
have
drink.
those conversations.
Hoda
on
made the
Today Show.
drinks. Oh my gosh, I think my eyebrows are ready to fall off. Hoda made pina coladas for us. Yeah, pretty strong. Yeah, we had those today.
Well, anyway, the access to Santiago is part of the plot, and it's a good thing to know, and what's at the other end. But this book travels because you're in Nevada. But where else do we want? I mean,
So we go to Libya, we go to Sicily,
yeah.
and we're in Paris and
Rome.
other spots. Yeah, and it's fun for me to do this. What's interesting is I've got a show I love. So John Voight, the actor, is a reader of my books. And John Voight had contacted me once about the movie rights to the books and all this kind of stuff. And I remember talking to my entertainment attorney after I saw the phone. It was a Beverly Hills area code. I figured nothing bad ever comes out of Beverly Hills except the Kardashians. So I was like, this will be good. I'll answer this. And then you hear that voice. I wish I could mimic John Voight's voice. But he called me and I just, "Brad, I love your books and I love this intelligence agent from Israel that you have. I'd love to do this with you." And I explained to him that the books were already taken by another film company, blah, 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 blah. And I immediately called my entertainment attorney in LA, and he's a real character. And he never gets excited about anything, and I'm always trying to get his goat. And he's a great guy. He's got a great sense of humor. But he said, "Well, what did you tell him?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And I said, "Voight was really upset that I wouldn't give him the rights." And he said, "Well, did you try to calm him down or what?" I said, "Well," "John, we don't always get what we want in life. I wanted to date your daughter, but Brad Pitt married her." So I said, "There you go." It's kind of Angelina Jolie thinks so. That got my entertainment attorney laughing. I love that one.
My wife isn't watching because I could point out that you now have a chance.
Oh, that's right, yeah. And Brad Pitt just got seen with Elle McPherson. Apparently they went on a date, so. Yeah. So.
You know, I thought another theme I was going to say I see developing is that thrillers are going more and more global. Travel is so fast. Mike Madden, who's doing the Clancy franchise, is a drones guy. I mean, he actually has technical expertise in drones, so the new Clancy has this amazing drone in it and so forth. But it's almost impossible now to write a book that isn't global, where your stage has expanded if you're doing thrillers because of all this, both the technology and the travel.
Absolutely, and what's interesting, you'll see, if you haven't read Use of Force yet, there are issues in parts of the world based on where the drones are launched from. So you can be in Libya, and if your drone comes out of Sicily, from our airbase in Sicily, it's allowed to do certain things. If the drone comes out of the shared base with the Tunisians, there's a whole other set of rules. It's fascinating. And I wove that into the story too, of where that could be a good or it could be a bad, based on where you were, what was happening, and what you needed done by the drone. So this crazy kind of calcification Washington bureaucracy actually follows SEALs and Delta Force guys, even into some of the darkest hellholes around the world. It's crazy what they have to deal with, that they actually have red tape when they're being shot at. By the way, for those of you, did anybody in here read Patrick Robinson's book that he did with Marcus Luttrell, Lone Survivor? The book, and they did the movie with, okay, so yesterday was Mike Murphy, yep.
I was his teacher.
Oh, you were Mike Murphy's teacher?
Yes, sir.
Wow. Well, yesterday was the 12th anniversary of Operation Red Wings, and so I'm just kind of pointing that out as I'm on the road for people to, when you go home tonight, to just think about that for a minute. That was a terrible, terrible loss for not only the SEAL community, but also there were a bunch
That's
of Army
when the
Rangers.
47 went down. That's what the 47.
There were two
shot
Chinook
down.
helicopters that went down, as well as Marcus's team. And I know Marcus was at Arlington Cemetery yesterday with his brother and some other folks visiting the graves. But I think sometimes we forget in our fast pace. It's always what's the next thing. But I've been bringing that up while I've been on the road and it's an amazing book, by the way. If you haven't read Marcus's book, Lone Survivor, and you've only seen the movie, the book is incredible. And Patrick Robinson, who knows the SEAL community in and out, is a wonderful author.
You know, as an author, it's really a challenge to keep up with this evolving technology, isn't it? I mean, drones are a game changer. And God knows what's coming next. Did you read about the Chinese and their new facial recognition and other? They're going. You can. China's working it out so that people are always going to be recognized and on camera, and you earn social credits or demerits. And it was in the journal. Did you read that?
Yeah, I saw it.
There's a girl that ran a red light, or on her bicycle tried to beat a red light for the second time, and they had caught her the first time, and now they caught her the new time, and bang. And they are hoping to have all their citizens essentially into this network where, it's like your points on your driver's license or something, but they haven't said what happens to you if you pile up too many demerits. But just think
I can only imagine what the Chinese will do.
I mean, if basically everybody can be recognized and all, then how do you do things like work undercover or?
Well, yes, and that is so. This is a great point, and this is a problem that spies have, and it's also a challenge for writers because spies used to just have fake passports, right? And they go in and out of countries. But now with the facial recognition stuff, it's really difficult because if you are going to get scanned and go in and out. And the other thing that's chilling, just from kind of a freedom perspective, is the Brookings Institute did a study, and they didn't do it in the U.S. They did it in countries around the world, and they found that as the cost of data storage goes down, government surveillance goes up. And what ends up happening is you get these governments, again, they didn't study the U.S. government, but governments create these huge databases, they never erase them, and then they've got a prosecutorial time machine. So if they've got a problem with you now, then they can go back and look and figure out other things you've done and try to link it all together. So it is, when you combine it with the facial recognition, that kind of stuff is the technology is very scary.
Well, for an author who, wants to be inside the lines and follow. Now, for you, I think this is a really difficult thing because you're going to have to stay current with it as you write.
And I dealt with it in this book too. How do you get in and out of countries if you don't want to go through a port of entry? It's an important thing. Yeah.
Did I tell you? I just now thought of this. This is so much fun. My daughter and I took her to Peru for her 50th birthday, and we were down at Lake Titicaca, and the plan was we were going to go to Bolivia for the day. Bolivia's Navy is one ship on Lake Titicaca. It used to be that Bolivia and Peru were one country, but Bolivia is now landlocked, so it has a ship on Lake Titicaca. But anyway, somewhere or other the news came to me that we would have to pay $160 for a visa to spend 5 hours in Bolivia times 2. And I thought, I don't think so. So I called up to say, I think we'll pass on the $320 and the whole bit. And many phone calls later, they said, just show up. We'll have the driver there. My daughter and I were smuggled into Bolivia as contraband. They had a system where we bypassed the immigration thing at the border or whatever it is. It was hilarious. I said to Susan, the downside of this is we could disappear as into Lake Titicaca, and no one would know.
Well,
we don't have a record of
and considering how much stuff has been smuggled out of Bolivia into the rest of the world, I kind of like this turnabout. I like this, that you were smuggled in. That's a cool story.
But, in a place like that, you could actually, not all checkpoints are high-tech, is my point.
Right.
You've probably been in airports where, it wasn't as easy to get through security as it was in more sophisticated airports.
And you have stuff here set back from the border in Arizona, too, where there are other checkpoints where they're looking for people and things and stuff, and there's a lot of governments that don't have that other layer around the world. And this becomes a big, interesting thing as a thriller writer, too, because with the European Union, once you're in, and that's why ISIS is trying to smuggle people in to just even get a toehold in Greece or in Italy, because once people get in, they're hoping that they can work their way through. And with this book, I dealt with the very heavy connection between ISIS and the mafia, the Italian mafia, and how they're working together to smuggle people in and get weapons. It's a fascinating, fascinating connection.
And Sicily, in case
Right.
you mentioned Sicily. I would like to end up my questions with something that I think is maybe the most moving part of reading this book, and it resonated with me more, I think, than it has in the past. Your books are, aside from the plotting and the technology novel, your books are character-driven. Scott, who dives in, to danger, risks his life like constantly, wants to have a relationship. He wants to have a family, and he has. He's moved from Washington to the location where his girlfriend and her child are.
Boston.
Yeah, and I thought, wow, because that's a lot for him, but it's also a big risk for her to want to have a relationship with some guy who, if you read the Burning Man scene, you will go, if she were watching this, that'd be it. I found that really interesting.
But it's very true. So I call what I do faction, where you don't know where the facts end and the fiction begins, and that part is very true. So all of us that are sitting here tonight are sitting here because of the bravery of our law enforcement, our men and women in the intelligence community, and the military. So we owe our freedoms and our rights to the Creator, who endowed us with these freedoms, the founders who enshrined them, and then all of those people ever since that have offered basically a blank check that says up to and including my life to protect them. So we're very, very fortunate. But they're human beings. There could be no American dream without those willing to protect it. So I know a lot of folks, and I know that they love their jobs, they do it because they love their country, but they're human beings. They go through, particularly the guys like Scott that are away a lot. There's a lot of failed marriages, unfortunately, that happen, particularly with people in certain communities for the military or the parts of the intelligence world where they've got to go do these things. But there's also some great marriages. There are great families that stand behind their loved ones who are deployed, and they say, go do what you got to do. Don't even worry about us. We'll be here when you get back. And those are the kind of people that I really, really admire, and I want to pay tribute to them when I do my books.
I think it's a really wonderful choice, because very often the choice is that whatever romance or just hooking up is going on is with another member of the team, especially as women are more into combat and more doing things. So that way everybody's sharing the risk, and it's different. But
It's like campaign sex, where people are out on the campaign trail. I've heard that's really big, that these people who are out and they're away for a long time working on whether it's a presidential campaign or whatever. I'd never heard that term. Somebody told that to me recently. I haven't heard it, but that's what happens. They're working together these crazy hours. They're not home. They're in different places every couple of days, a new campaign trail stuff. And so that's very interesting. I haven't done that really in my books. I've had people make like in Code of Conduct, I had this person make a pass at Scott, but I wanted to show, he's a good guy. He represents those qualities that I think are important, that I respect and admire. But he said no.
I think my point was that if you take two people and they're both risk addicted or their jobs are risk addicted, that's one thing. But if you take a person who, like Scott, is constantly taking risks, and then you take somebody who's not part of that world and try to make it work, I think that's a harder challenge for you. So I really admired that in this book. I've admired all sorts of things in this book.
I appreciate it. That's good. Well, let me ask you this: since we're, is it okay if I give away a couple of prizes?
Absolutely.
Can we do that? All right. So those of you who have been to my signings before know that I make special challenge coins. I strike a limited amount of them for each book. Now, I actually think that it was here that someone said something to me last year, and I changed the back of my coin. Because my logo that I have that's on my shirt, on my website and stuff, used to be on the back of the coins. And I had somebody say, I really like, you've got Lions of Lucerne, don't you? I saw, yes. Okay. So the cover art for Lions of Lucerne, my very first book, has this beautiful lion with a flag in its mouth. And I had somebody say that they really liked that on the coin. So here, this gentleman has one of the older coins. So I did that again this year. I went back to that. I did a silver line with the coin, and then the artwork of use of force on the front. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask just a couple questions. You got to raise your hand. You can't yell out the answer. We're all adults here.
No, we're actually not.
So I'm going to stand up so I can kind of see everybody. So I'm going to make it tough because this goes so fast because this crowd is so well read with my books. So, all right, the first hand that goes up, I'm going to call on you for this answer. Where on Scott Harvath's property does he hide the majority of his weapons? Yes, ma'am.
In under the altar.
Very good. Wow, that's good. Under the altar of it's an old church. Very good. Wow, I thought that was going to be a hard one. I did that in Northvale, New Jersey, and nobody could answer. Actually, I did it on a Twitter takeover for my publicist's Twitter handle. Nobody could answer that.
You got to remember, I teach one of your books in my class.
Ah, that's one. See, there you go. I love teachers. I'm even happier that you got one. All right, should it be a harder one or an easier one? What do you think?
Harder.
Harder, huh? Okay, harder. Wow. All right. Harder. See, they all seem easy to me because I know all the answers. Huh. What should I do that's a harder one? Because it can't be from this book. It's got to be something kind of general knowledge from a previous book. What kind of car does Scott Harvath drive? Yes? Black Tahoe. Come on up and get your coin. That's it. This is a good crowd. All right. I actually have a couple more. Why don't it's my favorite bookstore. Let me ask a couple more questions. Congratulations. Yeah. Wow. Now I'll ask a really easy one and nobody will get it, right? That'll happen. All right. So, Scott is spelled with one T. Who can tell me why? Yes, sir.
His middle name is Thomas, and his mom didn't want the T's to run together.
Yeah, just like my mom named my brother Scotthor instead of Scott. So very good. Holy smokes, this is a really good crowd. There you go. He's got a stack of them from years. This is great because he works for me, and I take the coins out to the next signing. I only have 4 struck a year. I get 2 away, and he and I wrote kind of like a shill. All right, last one. I got to make this really, really, really hard. Okay. In my novel Takedown, a buddy of Scott's doesn't make it. What's his name? There's a service form in the end of the book. I finally stumped him. And
No fair turning on your phone.
It's 2 words, something, something, both words start with B. And if you've already won a coin, you can't put your hand up. So oh, way in the back. Bullet Bob. Wow, that's fantastic. Come on up. That's great. What's that?
Frisk him for a
Frisk him
phone.
for a phone. That's a nice shirt you got on there too. Congratulations. I like that shirt. Very good. All right.
Questions from the audience.
You
whenever
take
you
it.
get through.
Take a couple questions.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll just take a couple of questions because I know we got a lot of people we want to sign. And does anybody have any questions they want to ask? Yes, sir. Mr. Murphy's teacher.
Yes. Have you been to to Lieutenant Murphy's gravesite? Oh, okay.
No, I have not.
It's on the same level as Arlington.
Oh wow.
Have you met Dan and Maureen Murphy? Have you met them?
No, I have
No.
not. I've not. I know Marcus Luttrell pretty well.
Latrell? I have
and-
his book, signed book also.
Do you?
But if you get to Long Island,
Go
his
see it.
gravesite is unbelievable.
Okay. Well,
An
thank
old
you.
dollar reciprocate.
Yeah. It amazing man. And the movie, I actually think they did a lovely job with that movie. It was quite a tribute to those brave men who passed. All right, couple more. Anybody got some questions? Yes, sir.
When's the next Athena project?
So when's the next Athena project book? Yeah, no, that is coming. So the Athena project book, I actually have what I think is a really cool idea to do it. And my time when I haven't been working on the Harbath stuff has been trying to get a movie off the ground. And I filmed a thing with Access Hollywood. I gave them an exclusive where we now have a screenplay written by an amazing screenwriting duo. And we have one of the biggest action movie directors now attached to the film. So I gave Access Hollywood an exclusive. We filmed it yesterday in New York. They're going to run it, I think, next week. And the New York Times is doing a piece on me. I don't know if it's going to be in this Sunday's book section. We're waiting to hear where it's going to be. And we'll be revealing it there, too. So that's where most of my energy outside of writing the books has been. And that's the thing I really want to get off the ground. That's the big, like if you want to go to that Baldacci level or to the Grisham level, it's really the film or television, getting that on. Like I've become friendly, I love Twitter for this reason. I've become a little bit friendly with Michael Conley. So he's got his Bosch series on Amazon and things like that. So, and it's great for book sales. It really is great for book sales. It takes your sales to a whole new level. So I want to do an Athena, and I got a great idea for an Athena. So it's just a matter of if I can put this Hollywood thing, like get the train the rest of the way out of the station, then I'll be able to do that. And I think it's put together well enough that I could write it in the same year as writing my next hardback. So I hope that answers. Doesn't give me an actual date, but it tells you it's close.
As long as there will be one.
Yes, oh, definitely will be.
Right,
Absolutely.
well, actually, that was going to be my closing question, is what about Scott Harbath's 17?
For the books, yeah. I mean, so that's what I've already got an idea based on a couple of little clues that I planted in this book that you might not notice until you read the next one. So I did a couple of things. I planted a couple of things. I didn't leave dangling things that you're like, oh, I can't believe you didn't deal with that. But I did put a couple of Easter eggs in here that'll pay off in the next book. So that's I'm ready. We're going to be on tour and take a little vacation, and then I'll be back at my desk.
I always like you to leave, all of you knowing that in fact there is another book, right?
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely,
it's
yes.
very unnerving to leave here going,
No. There's definitely another book with Harbath.
Now, we have a little thing we do to thank everybody for coming, and you should have a numbered ticket in your book, a book that you purchased. And the book I picked to give away is a little tribute to your publisher.
Oh,
is
look at
Barry
this.
Lancet, and this is The Spy Across the Table, and his hero is a guy who's does security and private investigating work in Japan and in the United States, and this is begins when a woman is killed and it turns out that she was a friend of the First Lady, and so this becomes much more of a political thriller. But
Wow.
Barry really knows a lot about Japan, and so there's always Japanese antiques and all kinds of, and there's a great scene in a kabuki theater that starts out, which I absolutely love. So if you could pick a number between Well, up there, never mind. 156.
All right, so to honor those brave men who lost their lives 12 years ago yesterday, I'm going to take the 28th because it was June 28th,
That's really
2005.
Very symbolic. And
So
you
who's
have
got 28?
Oh, you do.
Congratulations.
There you go.
And you know, are you on Facebook or Twitter?
Facebook.
Facebook. If you like the book, will you take a picture of it? Even before you start reading, if you feel comfortable, if you can take a picture and tag Barry in it and say you won his advanced reader's copy, just showing a picture of books you own or books you're reading does a ton for the author. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you. Well, like, you know, I do think, you know, and you're very generous about it too, that it's always nice to use this opportunity to highlight, you know, other things.
Anybody but Steve Barry. You got it. He cheats at cards. Cheats at cards and uses my character's name in his book.
He won't be around again until March 17th.
He's lovely.
He's already
He's
made his
lovely.
date. Yep. So
Another person. I tease those guys. We kind of came up together, and we were in the initial throes of the International Thriller Writers Association, and along with Brad Meltzer, Nelson DeMille, James Rollins, and Steve Barry, fabulous. And you're going to have Nelson here.
Nelson will be here on October 5th, and Michael Carita, who doesn't have a book this year, is going to fly out and host him, which I think will be. I'd like to keep Michael in front of his public, even if he doesn't have a
That's
book.
nice.
Yeah, so you have a chance to see these other authors, many of them that Brad has recommended to you or whose books you would like. Nelson's book goes to Cuba. It's a really interesting book. It is not his series character, but it's a new book.
And I hear that his sense of humor is right on in that. I've been hearing stories of people who've gotten the advance copy
Yeah, I just
and like
read it.
have been laughing out loud as they've read it. So, and I know you do numbers as far as people come up.
We do.
Is there anyone here tonight who has a babysitter? As a parent who pays a lot of money to some very entrepreneurial teenage girls in my neighborhood, I understand it can get really expensive, and we've been here. Is there anybody that has to get back to a babysitter? Anybody here with small children at all? Okay, good. All right, then I'll let you do your thing.
All right, I will do my thing. Our thing is to, first of all, thank Brad for coming.
Thank you for
And Brad and I and the Boys and Pen staff would like to thank you because actually the most important people here tonight are not us, but you.
coming. Amen.
Really.
Yep,
So
thank
thank you
you.
so much for coming. Now, because I've already mentioned to you that I worry about your safety, I hate to make you go outside because it's so damn hot. So what I'd like you to do is to stand up and, well, if you don't go outside, we can't pick the chairs up. So I guess that's what we're going to do. If you could stand up and fold up your chairs and move them against the wall, then I'll get the chair crew to come in. And then I'm going to ask Brad to sit here at this little table, and you can sign it lined up by number from 1 to 50, whatever it is, as soon as we get the chairs out of the way.